Hello, and welcome along to my first Common Sense Applied to Conspiracy Theories video. The conspiracy I first found myself drawn towards, trying to understand why people would believe it, was Flat Earth. The basic premise is that the world is flat, not a globe. Proponents of the Flat Earth commonly use something called a Gleason's map to show how this Earth might look in reality. So who made this map? Well, in 1892, Alexander Gleason, an engineer and publisher, created the map as a projection from a globe, with the North Pole at the centre and the continents spread out around that. He never claimed at any point in his publication that the world was indeed flat. And further out from the centre you go on his map, the more distorted it all looks, to take account of the fact that he developed it from a globe. Now, flat earthers have adopted this map as real and the scientific map when it was never intended for that purpose. It is used extensively by flat earthers whilst trying to prove their point of view. So now we have that background, let's move on to the challenge at hand. A YouTuber called Peter Lunt has asked the question why people in Australia cannot see the star Polaris. Now, the commonly accepted reason is because, being in the southern hemisphere and Polaris being stationed above the North Pole, the actual Earth is going to be in the way. This in itself is a very simple debunk of flat Earth, which is probably why Peter's trying to answer the question. Peter, though, proposes an alternative to make it work on his flat Earth map. And the idea he's using is called a vanishing point. First, let's be clear about what a vanishing point actually is. It's all to do with perspective and the distance between the viewer and the object they're viewing. Let's be clear, perspective doesn't make objects actually disappear. That's not the intention of the word vanishing. It makes them look smaller, but until they're no longer visible. That doesn't mean that they no longer exist. Nor does it mean that even though with the naked eye you cannot see them, that you cannot use a tool such as a telescope to still view them. So, all that given, let's see what Peter has to say.
Ahead of you, or straight above you rather. So you'd be looking across and looking up and Polaris would be there. Now that's quite a short distance. But if you're looking at it from Australia, this is Australia. So you'd be looking up and across and you see the distance. So there's the UK, there's Polaris, or the North Pole, Polaris above it. There's Australia, looking across and up, North Pole, Polaris above it. So you can see the distances involved.
So if Polaris was simply too far away and vanished by perspective, then all the stars in that direction should vanish in the same way. But that's not what we observe, is it? In reality, as you travel south, Polaris gets lower in the sky. At the equator, it sits right on the horizon, and then when you're south of the equator, it's not visible at all. And that's not random. That's a smooth, predictable change, and it's tied exactly to the latitude from which you're viewing the star. Interestingly, Peter then goes out on to mention the Southern Cross to reinforce his point. Now that's a constellation which is in effect the opposite of Polaris. It's sitting almost directly over the South Pole. What observations does he make to back up his point using this? Let's have a look.
The interesting thing is, we can't see things that they can see. So in Australia, they can see the Southern Cross, and we can't see it.
So, people in Australia can see a constellation called the Southern Cross. Now, here's the key problem with the vanishing point claim. People in the Southern Hemisphere can all see the Southern Cross, but they see it from vastly different locations. Yes, Australia can see it, but so can South America, Africa, Australia, as we've mentioned, and New Zealand. If perspective were the reason that Polaris disappears, then by that argument, the Southern Cross, visible for people in Australia, should also vanish for most observers on the other side of his flat Earth map, such as those in Africa or South America. Or it would appear in wildly different positions for different southern countries. But the reality is, it doesn't. Instead, everyone in the southern hemisphere sees the Southern Cross rotate around the same southern point. Just like people in the northern hemisphere see stars rotate around Polaris. You cannot explain two opposite rotating star systems with a single vanishing point argument. And here's the simplest basic question to really hit the final nail in the coffin of this idea. If Polaris disappeared due to perspective, then simply using strong optics, we should be able to bring it back into view in the southern hemisphere. But we can't. No one can, and it never does. That means it's not vanishing or out of sight. It's quite simply below the horizon. So, the Southern Cross exists, it's shared by the entire southern hemisphere, and behaves exactly like Polaris does in the northern hemisphere. Something that only makes sense if the sky is wrapped around a globe not laid out flat. That's not my opinion, that's simply evidence and observations. So what we are seeing here with Peter, and we see a huge cognitive bias towards a desired outcome that clearly isn't true. So much so that he even debunks himself in the process due to not really stress testing his idea objectively. He doesn't even see that he's done this when publishing the video. Confirmation bias is a very prevalent behaviour in a lot of conspiracy theorist videos, and here we see it raising its ugly head once more. So, some simple questions asked, some common sense applied, theory debunked. Thank you very much for watching. Please do comment and subscribe, and look forward to the next one. Bye.